1960, The Making of the President. This is a two-player game, and two-player only, that portrays the national election in the US of 1960, Kennedy versus Nixon. So the two players will play the role of Kennedy and the Democrats, and Nixon and the Republicans, respectively. This is the new edition by GMT of a game that was published a couple of years ago, almost 10 years ago, I believe, but I didn't play the original edition, so I cannot compare the two. From what I understand, reading about it online, it seems that this edition is like physically different. The production changed, the graphic changed, the box changed, but it should play more or less like the original edition did. So if you missed the first edition, like I did, now you get a chance to play the game. If you had the old one, I don't know, maybe you want a more modern design for the box and the board, but other than that, probably your old edition should be serviceable enough. Card-driven game, so same engine of popular games in the last couple of years, such as Twilight Struggle, Labyrinth, or 1989. So if you play any of those games, you know some of the basic concepts that we have here. Anyways, let's take a closer look at the game now. Here we get a general view of the board, and I really like the board. It's simple, clear, colorful, but somewhat unobtrusive, and it has a certain elegance to it, and it's also very functional. You see that the board is divided in states, unsurprisingly, given the theme, and each state has a box with the number of electoral votes that state generates, and as you can imagine, the number varies greatly. New York and Pennsylvania being worth a lot, Ohio quite a bit, other states not so much. You see a band there, a color band at the top of each state. That's the direction that the state is leaning towards, and if at the end of the game no one has any presence in there, then the state will go to that side. And also you have some cubes that are already on the board at the beginning of the game during setup. These cubes represent support, so when you see a blue cube, that is support for Nixon. Sorry, when you see a red cube, that is support for Nixon, and when you see blue cubes, you know that those states are at the present time supporting Kennedy. Only one player can have support cubes in a state, so if an opponent has cubes in a place and you want to place some, you need to first remove those and then you start adding yours. Also, we have two tokens that physically represent the two candidates. That token there is Kennedy, who starts the game in Massachusetts, and then here we have Nixon, who starts the game in California. So this is the general idea. You will play cards to generate actions, to place support cubes here, also to place cubes in these areas here that represent the media. If the medias are friendly to you, that's good to you. And also we have three issues that people care about during the game: defense, economy, and civil rights. Some of the random functions in the game are resolved by drawing cubes from this bag. At the beginning of the game, you place 12 blue cubes and 12 red cubes in here. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. And then there are two types of checks that you will perform by drawing cubes from here. One is the initiative check at the beginning of each turn to determine who decides who goes first. You draw cubes until you're at 2 cubes of a side. In this case, we got 2 blue, so the Democrats will decide who goes first. In many cases, that means that they will go first. If the second cube that I drew was, for example, a red one, then I would need to draw another one, and that, in this case, actually, Nixon and the Republicans go first. And you simply return the drawn cubes to the supply, to the pool of available cubes of the player that owns those cubes. So this is the initiative check. The player that gets 2 of them decides who goes first in a turn. The other check that you take from this bag is the support check. Super mega important. Support check. In many cases, you'll be able to perform actions that let you simply add the cubes to a certain place, that is, to add support to a certain place. In other cases, if you want to add cubes, it's not automatic and you need to take a check. That happens if you want to take cubes, you want to place cubes in a state where the opponent has 4 of their supports or more. In this case, the term is that that side is carrying the state. So if the Republicans want to place a cube in Rhode Island, the opponent now is carrying the state. Also, if your opponent, the marker of the opponent is physically present in that state, it's not automatic, it will be able to add the cubes. So you spend actions in the game either to purchase cubes that then you can place in states according to certain restrictions. So you can spend cubes to place in states in many cases, but again, in these two cases, physical presence and the opponent is carrying the state, you need a support check. That means you spend actions to buy a certain number of support checks. Suppose I spend enough actions to buy 3 support checks in Rhode Island and I am the Republicans. Then 3 support checks means that I draw 3 cubes from here, and the cubes, oh, this is super bad, and the cubes that are of my side, I actually get to place them there, and the cubes that are of the opponent are returned to the opponent. So my 3 support checks did absolutely nothing there. Suppose next turn I have 3 more support checks. What is going on here? What is going on here? The following turn I have 3 support checks. Hooray! In this case, this goes to the pool of the Democrats, and these 2 are added to the state where I took the support checks. Only, however, remember, only one player can have cubes, so if there are cubes of the opponent, my cubes, instead of being placed, remove an equal number of the opponent's cube. And that is the difference between placing cubes automatically and placing them through support checks. This is a card-driven game, so the other random functions in the game are handled by using cards. Each player receives a hand of 6 or 7 cards at the beginning of each turn. How is that decided? Well, we are gonna have a look at the turn track here. As you can see, turn 1 to 5, each player will receive 6 cards. Then you have a special turn called the debates, and then turn 7 and 8, each player will receive 7 cards. And then we have election day, which is the last turn. Each turn, each player will play exactly 5 cards. So that means at the end of a turn, you will have 1 card left here, and you will place it in this box here, the campaign strategy box. Each player has one. So by the time the debates come around, each side will have 5 cards that they have stored here. They're played during the debates, and we'll see how later. Here, at the end of each turn, after each player played exactly 5 cards, it will be 2 and 2. So when it comes to election day, each player will have 4 cards in their strategy, in their campaign strategy, and those 4 cards will be played on election day. Those are 2 special turns that work differently from the other turns. So when you play a card, you look at the side that controls that card, or in any case, I would say that that card is friendly to. These cards can be played, the cards can be played for the number of campaign points or for the event by the side that has their symbol here. So the Democrats can play this one to generate 2 campaign points or to resolve that event. When you resolve an event, you simply do what the text of the event says. This one can be played by the Republicans for campaign points or for the event. If you have a card that has a symbol of the opponent, you can only play it for the campaign points. An interesting thing is that when an opponent plays a card for campaign points, you can hijack the effect. There are tokens in the game, they're called momentum tokens, and both the Democrats and the Republicans start with several, and you can spend a momentum token to activate the effect on a card that has your symbol and that has been played by the opponent. However, if I have a card of the opponent and I'm gonna play for points, and I really don't want you to activate that, I can spend 2 momentum points of my own to lock the effect. So I'm playing your card and I'm preventing you from spending a momentum point. It's a very expensive thing, but sometimes it can be very vital. There are some, almost I would call them doomsday cards, and you really don't want those cards. to be used by the opponent, so you want to block that effect. There are several ways of doing it. For example, you can, if there is a very powerful card with an effect on the opponent, you can save it at the end and place it in your campaign strategy. That would be the card that you do not play. There's also another option. As I said, you will play exactly 5 cards, but during your turn, you can play a card, pretty much burn it, you discard it, and instead of resolving what's on this card, each player has a card representing their candidate. So instead of resolving what is on that card, you simply use your candidate card that generates 5 campaign points, and then you flip it to the side. There's no effect but recording that for that turn you cannot use this effect anymore. And next turn this will be available again. So that's useful, 5 campaign points, hooray, but also it is great because that's another way of burning an effect that you don't want the opponent to use. Of course, then there are cards that allow the opponent to go in and dig in the discard pile, so that there's that possibility there too. So you play a card for the event, do what it says, or for campaign points, and then you'll spend campaign points. Each card also has a number of rest points here. When you play a card, you take that number of cubes, say you play this card, and you take 2 cubes, and you place them in an area on the board, which is called the rest area. And simply, so during the turn, you will accumulate cubes there, and these cubes will be dumped into the bag at the end of the turn, and that's how you seed the bag, how you place cubes of your own. As you can see, that's very important because you want cubes there to do support checks. So I play a card to generate campaign points. I play this card whose effect is still to generate campaign points, and I can use them to do one of 3 things. Do actual campaign, try to influence the media, or take a position on the issues of defense, economy, or civil rights. You can only do one of these things. If I start spending points campaigning, I have to spend them there. If I start spending points on the media for that turn, I have to spend them all there. Campaign is very simple. A campaign point lets me place a cube in the place where I am. I can also move my marker within the region. As you can see, there are different regions. This is the northeast. Here we have the south, the Midwest, and the west. Alaska and Hawaii count as 2 regions for travel purposes. So within each region, I can travel for free. So for example, suppose I have 3 campaign points and I'm Kennedy, I can do 1, and that's 1 campaign point. 2, and again, I'm moving for free within that region, and I'm spending a campaign point to remove this one, and then I spend another campaign point to add mine. That would be a legitimate thing. But what if I want to move to another region? Then to travel to another region, it costs me a campaign point. So suppose that I want to go here. Next turn, again, I have 3 campaign points. Then I do 1 to travel there, 2 to remove this one, and then say I want to go here. Now I'm traveling within the region, so it's for free, and I spend my other campaign point to remove this one here. Just an example of traveling. So you travel from one region to the other by spending a campaign point within the region for free. And that's how you spend points when you're campaigning, dropping cubes on the board and or removing cubes of the opponent and traveling within your area or between areas. You can also try to influence the media. These boxes here, these are the media for the east, media from the south for the south. As you can see, each region has its own media box. Medias are always difficult to predict. So when you spend your campaign points, you don't get to automatically place your cubes there. Each campaign point gives you a support check. So suppose I have 3 campaign points, then I get the bag, and I draw 3, and all the cubes that are mine I get to add. In this case, I am the Democrat, I get only 1 there. Same idea. If the opponent has cubes there, first I need to remove their cubes, and each cube of mine removes 1 of theirs. In this case, they have 1. I would add 1 cube. Nothing happens. Now those medias are uncontrolled. If you control, or I should say influence the media, then you do not have to take support checks in the region where those medias are. The media give you that edge. So now, if you control the media or influence the media in a region, You do not have to take support checks if the opponent has 4 cubes, and you do not have to take support checks if the opponent is physically present. You simply get to add your own cubes as normal, as usual. The other thing that you can do is to spend campaign points to take a position on these issues. The first place issue is the one that people care the most about. This one a little less, this one a little less. And these may switch place during the game because sometimes, you know, certain issues become more important and then they become less interesting to people again. To place a cube on an issue, the first cube in a turn costs you 1 campaign point. The second cube on the same issue in a single turn, 2 campaign points. The second one, 3 campaign points, and so on and so forth. Usual idea. If the opponent has cubes there, you need to remove theirs before you can place yours. So if I really want to place a cube on civil rights, I spend a point that will place 1, but actually removes that, and then I spend 2 more to generate another cube, which I place there. At the end of the turn, several things happen, and one is the momentum phase. After players played 5 cards, one thing is that you lose half of your momentum tokens because people get distracted, their attention span is short, and they forget about the momentum that you had. If a player controls more media than the opponent, that player can switch to cubes. It can switch to issues, which is totally cool. You spent a lot taking a good, strong, relatable position on an issue, and then all of a sudden people don't care about that issue nearly as much. I like this. Controlling the media makes the issues more or less relevant. After there was that one switch. If a player has more control of the media than the other, it may be that doesn't happen. Players get their rewards. If you have a presence on the 3rd place issue, you get a momentum token. If here you get a momentum or an endorsement, and here you get a momentum and an endorsement. What are the endorsements? When you get an endorsement, you draw a card from this deck that tells you the region in which you will place an endorsement marker. And then simply you get an endorsement marker with your side face up, and you place it in a state in the region that was indicated there. What does it do? If on election day there is an area where no one has any cubes, it goes to the player that had an endorsement there. In this case, this state left alone with nothing in it on election day will go to the Democrats because the band is blue. In this case, it will go to the Republicans. In this case, it will go to the Democrats. So the day of the election, the cubes take priority to determine who gets a state. If there are no cubes or an endorsement, the state goes to the party that placed the endorsement there. If there's nothing, then the band that is printed on the box, on the board. So this is the general idea of the things that you can do: campaigning, issues, and media. There are 2 special turns, so the debates and election day. Pretty much the day of the debates is a special turn. You take the issues from the board and you place them on this mini board here. The players will retrieve the cards that they saved at the end of each turn, and then they will play them one at a time. Each player places a card face down there, then players reveal the card at the same time, and at that point you look at this icon here that tells you the issue that card is about. So I'm going to place this one next to the economy, which now is there, and this card I place next to defense, which is here. And then simply you repeat that. So one card per player there, face down from, again, that mini deck that you formed. Reveal, place where they need to go. This one also goes to the economy, and this one also goes to defense. When an issue has 2 sides, has two cards on the same side, like it happens here and it happens here, that issue is resolved, and at the point the player that has the most campaign points in that issue wins that issue. Here I get 4. When it resolves, which is now, the opponent has 0, then I win this one. Here the other side has 5, and I have 0, so that side gets that issue. When you win the issues during the debates, you get extra cubes that you get to place on the board, so that is neat. The day of the election, simply put, the day of the election, there are events that may need to be resolved. Some events are called election day events. They're resolved only on that day. They are maybe powerful last-minute effects. So you resolve those. You play those cards that you saved in the last part of the game. So you will have 4. And at that point, you look at the corner here, and that indicates the states where on election day you will get 3 checks. So in each state that you say there, you get 3 support checks. Again, for last minute changes of mind in the population. That may alter the composition of cubes on the map. After you do that, you take care of the events and all that. It is time, finally, to tally the votes. Players determine who gets each state, total the number of electors, and the player with the most electors is going to be elected next president of the United States and also wins the game. I like this game quite a bit. After playing other games such as 1989, Try to Struggle, or Labyrinth, this one feels simpler. Less complicated. It has a little less tension. Those other games have moments that are particularly intense, sort of like bottlenecks of action, where it really seems to come down to like a single card play, to a single mistake that you may or may not make, or a single opportunity that you may or may not miss. This seems more like, I should say, long-term. There are some Doomsday cards that are incredibly powerful, but maybe you get one and then I get one, or you get one and I'm able to come back and be able to block that. It feels more casual. I'm not talking so much about gameplay, but almost like the mental posture of the players, because there's so much to do and so little that you think you can do. And so in many games, including this one, that is something of course keeps you interested, which is great. I would almost say here, I almost feel a little bit zen, like, okay, I cannot get Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and California and Texas and Ohio. I need to prioritize, and look at that, I prioritize the same objectives as you did. So I can choose to start a tug of war with you and we just fight over New York for the entire game, in which case the game is not necessarily all that exciting. Players could decide to play it that way, I guess. Or, most interestingly, I can think of other strategies. And again, I cannot do everything, but precisely because of that, there's also a range of things that I can do. I got the sense that I can always do something. And I like that very much. Again, it's a game with a lot of options, a lot of interesting things. It feels less intense, it feels less exhausting. It's like when at the end of a game of Labyrinth, I have a headache and my heart is pumping and I'm sweating and I'm happy. I had a sort of like exhaustion after a very good demanding game. Here is more relaxed, but I'm still having fun. I'm still involved in the game. I'm still involved in the design. A lot of options, a lot of interesting card effects, but also a lot of different ways of mitigating the effects of a bad hand. I can choose to burn a card to play my candidate. I can save a card that I don't want to play for the debates or for the election day. Worst come to worst, I can block the negative effect of an effect that I'm afraid you're going to trigger. I can block it with 2 momentum tokens. And it's interesting that I can be involved in the game as you are playing, because I want to see, oh, look at that delicious event that you're playing, and I spend my momentum token there, and I feel so smart, and I play that effect only to discover next time that you go that you have an even better effect for me that now I cannot play because I spend my momentum. So there is even is that element of baiting the opponent into using their momentum or something that looks really great for them when you have in your head something that will be even better for them. Just a lot of these interesting decisions here, and I find that the different elements of the design really go together well. The fact that I'm managing my cards, thinking about what they can do for me and what they can do for you. And as you're playing your cards, I'm thinking about what your cards can do for me. It's really, I don't think what your hand of cards can do for you, but what you can do with the cards of your opponent. So you have that element. The board element is an interesting map. Of course, there will be some foci of attention. Again, the only risk here is two players really getting stuck on the same two states and making it swing from one side to the other the entire game. Probably the game will feel stale. But then you're missing an opportunity because there are probably ways, not just of having more fun with the design, but of playing more effectively or pursuing your strategy more effectively. Get control of the media, get a good position on the issues. Plan some chains of effects that will give you like large areas. There are momentum cards that are particularly powerful, allow you to grab a bunch of unclaimed states in a single sweep that can be very interesting. Instead of just getting stuck on that one state, get 5 smaller states that are just as profitable, and it would take a while for the opponent to go around and retake them from you. A lot of interesting considerations. I found the strategy pretty fluid. I never felt stuck, even when I had a hand that looked bad at the beginning. At the end of the turn, I was not necessarily satisfied with the choices that I had made, but I was happy with the choices that the game was giving me. Again, it felt more casual than some of the card-driven games out there, but precisely because of that, also it can work as an introductory game. With players that haven't played other card-driven games before. And while being more quote-unquote casual, it still was interesting. It still had a lot of interesting design elements and moving parts there. Also, the history that you see in the game is particularly interesting. I learned a lot about the election of 1960. I didn't know about it nearly as much as I sense that they do now. So if you're a teacher, or in any case you want to use it in a pedagogical context, there's a lot of history that can be learned from this game, both about simply the content, from the text of the cards and the accompanying books, to the dynamics and mechanics. When you do something, this is what happens. And this is what's beautiful about games. They can teach you about the content, and they can teach you about the mechanics and dynamics that are behind the event. So you don't just know about what happened, but also how and why things happen. So I definitely enjoyed that aspect. I think the card-driven games were particularly well when in war games and in political games, because cards always bring a considerable element of luck. And you should have that when you're talking about complex topics such as war and politics, which are things in which you're swimming against the current and in a very large river, and you cannot affect much of that. You have to do what you can with what the river is throwing at you. Cards really represent that well, the idea of opportunities that come and go. You have to identify the right moment, make do with what you have, make the best of what you have, rather than having a perfect algorithm, a perfect plan, and follow that through. That you should not be able to do that in a war game. It's okay if you do it in chess or checkers or a Euro game, but in games with this thing, the chaos, the randomness that comes from a deck of cards to me is perfect, and it works very well. On top of that, here in this with this topic here, in this type of card-driven game, you have the added bonus of all of those pictures, historical pictures from the period, so you're seeing how things look like at the time. You have those captions that tell you why a certain card has a certain effect, which is what is the event that you represent. So it really brings the theme to life. It really adds that element of chrome, which is to me necessary to make this game really feel historical. I really like it. I like pretty much everything of it. If you're a hardcore fan of some more advanced card-driven games, this may feel a little bit like you're taking a step back, and maybe it may feel a little bit, too quote-unquote easy for you, too bland, too basic. But again, on the other side, maybe you want to take a break from some of those advanced games from time to time, you're introducing a new friend to the entire idea, then I find 1960 a perfect introductory game for card-driven political games. And if you're a fan of the system and you just wanna, a change of pace, still a very enjoyable game. In any case, a very enjoyable game, a game that can be used as a pedagogical tool, or simply if you don't care at all about the topic, it is still a game with a lot of interesting decisions and choices to make, and therefore a game with very engaging gameplay. 1960, The Making of the President by GMT. Second edition of the game, and definitely a good game.